Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Behind the Numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and this is the program where we dig deeper to understand what really matters most in business. And one of the things that really matters most in business is good communication skills. And that's critical for leadership, employee engagement, and everything that follows in business. Today, we're going to be having a very interesting conversation about communication skills with Dr. Candy Campbell. Candy, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Thanks, Dave.
You've got a very interesting background. I'm going to tease it, but I'm going to let you share. But we're going to be talking about how comedy, improv in particular, can be a great way to help improve communications inside organizations. So, with that as kind of the tee up, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your background and then we'll jump into that.
Well, my first college degree is in acting and speech communications. And then I realized that some of the moving up in that industry was going to be problematic for my personal moral code. So I took some work as a flight attendant, Pan Am gone but not forgotten.
Yeah.
And it was there at 30,000 feet that I got the call to be a nurse. And so working as a nurse, as a clinician, as an educator, as an administrator, and as an academic has been the background. But, you don't take the actor out of life. So that has spawned a lot of things. And I'll just briefly say, my publicist says I should say I'm an award-winning actor, author, filmmaker, and portrait artist.
I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm pretty sure that's going to live in the show notes. But thanks for sharing that with the audience now, because it does help to frame the conversation. So, why don't we start by let's define the problem from your perspective.
I believe, based on all what we have read, what's ever in the research before COVID and after COVID, um, the problem in the workplace is miscommunication. And specifically in risk-averse industries, it's interprofessional miscommunication. That leads to all sorts of problems like safety in the workplace, harm, uh, customer service complaints, employee dissatisfaction. You've got the turnover rate that goes up. This can even impact the brand when employees are not happy.
Oh,
And
sure.
customers sense this, right? Not to
Absolutely.
mention if you're producing anything like widgets or, well, customer service, that impacts the bottom line. Not to mention litigation.
Yeah, for sure. No, all those things absolutely spot on. So, give us a little bit of flavor about how you see the solution to these communication issues, and let's weave it in with the improv background, because I think that's kind of a key point from your lens, right?
It is. And, I think everybody comes to the workplace with predetermined assumptions about who we are. Some people call it your why, but I think that in America, we assume that everybody's created equal. To a greater or lesser degree, it's fulfilled in our workplace and in our laws. But relationally, most of us anyway, do our best to show up to work with an open mind and an open heart and do the best work that we can. Well, what we find out is no matter, even though, there's a phrase, Dave, people will say, oh, don't take it personally. It's only business when you like get fired or whatever
Yeah.
happens. And I take umbrage with that because I believe that everybody, if you look into your reactions to whatever happens to you personally or professionally, it's really about relationships. And when we look at the problem of miscommunication in the workplace, we see silos. We see people who are shut off from other people. And there's an assumption that the managers or the administrators are on one team and everybody who's doing the work is on another team. And that adds to the sickness if you will, to use a healthcare analogy. That adds to the sickness that really is like internal rot in an organization. I've seen it all over the place. And the way improv came into it, after I had kind of a life event, I decided I needed to laugh again. And so, even though I had a background in acting, we didn't really learn improv per se. So I started taking some clean comedy classes, and I noticed that everybody in the class, there was like 8 of us, were really good at going with the flow and kind of being malleable on stage. And I was having a problem with that because as an actor, I was trained to learn lines, to understand a scene that I was going into, to perceive, okay, what could have led up behaviorally to the person I was portraying having these thoughts and saying these words. But in improv, you don't get that. And you have to, like I said, you have to sort of go with the flow. So all of the other people in the class were taking improv. So I said, okay, I will do that. And I learned the principles. And we then, 4 of us, separated from that group after a few months and decided, we're all pretty good at this. We could create our own company, which we did in the San Francisco Bay Area. And that was in the early 90s. And we performed together for about 3 years before that group sort of, people move and go on their way. But in the meantime, in 1995, there was a fellow who came forward after one of the shows. And as opposed to a lot of people who were saying, oh, you must have had a plant. you must have sketched that one out. That was so good. And we're like, no, it was really improv. And he got it. He said, okay, what I see is that you took a problem and you transformed it almost instantaneously into some sort of solution. It was funny, but do you suppose you could come to my workplace and work with my very intelligent engineers who are having a terrible time communicating with each other and they're not getting any work done? And so that was the genesis of the light bulb that went on within me when I was the only one to sort of answer that call and create an applied improv curriculum for a workshop that wasn't just about going for the funny. It wasn't about comedy. It was really about bridging the gap there that had transpired. And that started the ball rolling. And I realized, oh my gosh, we need this in healthcare so bad. And so that was the genesis of the work that I've been doing since then.
Yeah, and I really want to unpack that because you're not the first guest on Behind the Numbers who mentioned to me that they've done improv as a way to help them become better speakers on stage. We didn't talk about it on camera, but this particular individual that I'm thinking of at the moment is a fantastic speaker. He attributes it to improv. I would love for you to share with our listeners how you can take some of those skills, some practical tips, and bring them inside of organizations to help better create a more open communication across all channels. Because I see it with clients, I've seen it in the companies I've worked with and worked for. You make assumptions. I think you alluded to that. People make assumptions about what's known, or they make assumptions about what's important and what's not, and things fall through the cracks.
Exactly. Well, it sort of presupposes that the leadership wants to change the culture and make it, as we say, psychologically safe for people to speak up. And one of the ways that when I'm working with leadership teams is to teach them some of these principles. And the first bedrock one is to accept all offers. And in improv, we call an offer anything that sort of tumbles out of somebody's mouth, whether it's, we deal in fictitious scenes that can be applied to real life. So if you and I are on stage and I say to you, hey, Bill, it's nice to see you here. that's an offer. My offer is that your name is Bill, and you won't counter with, no, my name is Charles. No, we say yes, and we go with the flow of whatever's given to us. Now, when students first hear that, they argue back, oh, wait a minute, like in my realm of healthcare, I'm paid as a professional to be a stopgap so that mistakes don't happen, because people die if certain medications aren't right or whatever. And that isn't to say, if you say yes and to ideas, that you're going to lift your professional standards and not stop an accident from happening. No, it means that 99% of the time, that's my statistics, just sort of. I'm saying
Yeah.
99% of the time in our lives, we're not dealing with an emergency where we have to say, stand back because somebody's going to get shocked. No, mostly it's within the way we relate to each other. And when we don't really have an already established relationship, or as you were alluding to, if the established relationship is staunch, I'm the boss, you're the employee, it's difficult. And so if, as the person who has the leadership position, if you can come out from behind that door that you've got closed all the time, if you can walk around with people and not be afraid to say hello and ask how they're doing. Now, I know the attorneys who are listening, especially HR, is like, oh, you don't want to get too close to people because, people are manipulative and you just risk litigation. But the workplace studies where people have, for instance, oriented the newbies into how to inculcate themselves into a culture of safety, it really is good to teach them to say yes and then risk being imperfect. See, it understands another one of the principles is that mistakes, and I don't mean mistakes in calculations and stuff. I mean mistakes in the way you relate to people, are not perfect, and that errors or mistakes are gifts, because it gives you a chance to relate to somebody. It gives you a chance to inject some humor. And we know that that's like the grease that keeps relationships going. We tell them some of the principles are to, whenever possible, avoid yes, no questions, because then you get your listening ears on instead of just asking, do you want this or this? Tell me about what you want or why it is you want that, and to be helpful. Those are some of the prime movers of culture, communication, and relationships.
Yeah, really good stuff there. And let me just maybe drill in a little bit deeper and try and draw the parallels from healthcare to business, because in the healthcare scenario where you've got several people from different areas working with the same patient, for example, communication across all channels is critical. Similar thing in business, whether you're working internally across departments or if you've got a client and they're being served by several people inside an organization. When you talk about the culture of communication and the ability to make sure everybody is on the same page all the time, I find that for so many organizations, it's difficult to do that.
It's very difficult. And one of the problems about that, as we know, is that egos get involved. And why is that? Well, because some people seem to fail upward. Have you noticed this? Some
Yeah.
people who, if you're working there, you think that person was overlooked for a promotion and they are clearly more qualified than the employer's nephew or whoever it is that just got
Right.
this position. And yet you're tasked with getting along with that person. And then if you're the nephew, you realize I've got to make good here. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I want to, learn as I go. There are some barriers to communication there. And that's why when I'm working with these teams, I tell them, look, we're going to start with the teams. We're going to do some train the trainer exercises so that you're less fearful about opening up. You don't have to be best friends with everybody, but if you just show that you're human, people love that. People
Yeah.
do not, it's if you look at some of the better business leaders that have a reputation for, whether they're living or dead, have a reputation for being great leaders. Jack Welch from GE is one that comes to mind. Steve Jobs is evidently another one. These are people who got things done, were very innovative, but they also weren't afraid to say hello and walk through the plant and know a little something about their employees. And their employees understood. They, I mean, they understood that if they put their toe over a certain boundary, the leader had enough foresight to say, that's something for somebody else, or I don't think we need to go there. Or boundaries are like even in our family units, like parents and children, we know there's certain things as teenagers that we don't cross a boundary, or there's going to be something, even if it's just a gentle, hey, better than that. We can know that there are certain types of boundaries within our institution. And because we're sentient beings, we don't always have to make a policy or a litigation procedure about conversation, but we know, we can perceive. Dave, I can perceive you're an open person, not just because I've listened to some of your podcasts, but because of the way you look at people, the way you speak, the way you present yourself. We are all sort of packages. And in the workplace, doesn't matter whether you're a risk averse, if you do something, somebody's going to die, or if you're profit averse, if you do something, it's going to crash the system. It doesn't matter. We all have to be cogs in these sorts of wheels. And the way we relate to people is really key.
Yeah, and some of the buzzwords in the business world are things like vulnerability, around an authenticity, right? So when you talk about the good leaders and just being human beings, right? What's your thoughts or advice for some of the younger folks in the audience who are listening, who maybe have to deliver upward communication to their superiors? You mentioned the word fear, and I know some of the young professionals that I've come in contact with uh, sometimes are afraid of number one, speaking their mind, let alone saying anything at all, especially in a meeting scenario. Maybe it's fear of embarrassment. Maybe it's because they're afraid that the message they're going to deliver is something that's not going to land well.
Mm-hmm. That is true. There's always a risk in everything that we do. Now, when I counsel with executives and young executives too on speech writing and delivering, one of the things I say, other than the physical part of taking a deep breath and remembering, if you're presenting an idea, especially if it's innovative or if you feel that it has some risk involved, it's not about you, really. Don't worry about the blowback to you. What you should worry about is your attitude, because whether you know it or not, your leaders are looking, maybe not directly, but indirectly. They're looking for the next generation of leaders. And they're looking for somebody who is not just, not to use the buzzwords, they're looking for a good attitude of somebody who, based on the way you present yourself, has the best interest of the business in mind. And any business that is worth anything, really, it's about the customer or the end consumer.
Yeah.
And if that is the goal, then a savvy leader who isn't just the nephew who's afraid of his position, is going to be looking for, in terms of succession planning, is going to have his eye out. You can see this, if I can give you an example, that's something that we all observe because we watch TV, and whichever, if it's cable or the main media, whatever you watch, it doesn't matter. You'll see a young reporter coming up, and I'm at the age now where they all look very young. You'll see a reporter coming up and you think, oh, they're on the ground. Gee whiz, that poor person's out there in a hurricane. They're standing there and they're about to be blown away. And the next thing you know, given some time, if they do a good job, they're in studio. And maybe they're doing a man on the street interview once in a while. And then if they do well, pretty soon they're in the studio more. You see, there's a succession. And why?
Yeah.
Because they've done a good job and they've had a good attitude, even if what they bring to the table is maybe a little stringent or hard to hear. Everybody wants somebody to be honest with them in a kind, considerate, caring way. That tells about your integrity. And you know something? You can hire for skill, but boy, you need attitude. And what is the difference between honesty and integrity? I think honesty is something that we all know is the best thing. But integrity is, I think, how you use that. Are those standards that you adhere to? And sometimes in the little things, like just how you answer a question. What is your attitude? Is it acidic? Do you snap at people? Or do you respectfully come with a new idea? And I'm here to tell those young people, however young you might be, or newer to the organization, your leaders see this and they're on your side.
Yeah. So much there. And part of it is the so-called paying your dues, but you're paying your dues with the right attitude. And I think that's critical because I always hired for attitude. Um, you can teach people how to do the job, but you can't teach people how to be good team players, have intellectual curiosity, and all those things that the attitude comprises. So that's a great message for anybody who's out there listening. You choose your words carefully, but more importantly, choose how you deliver those words. Candy, I want to give you an opportunity to do a little humble brag here because you did mention, and I do have it on my list of things I wanted to talk to you about, the award-winning film that you produced and directed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's a niche market film, so not all of your viewers listeners might be interested. But as a neonatal intensive care nurse for many years, in the just before the turn of the century, there came out some interesting and upsetting research about the babies that they had followed that were born in the 80s. And at the end of the 90s, they concluded the research, and the findings were upsetting because they did not think that being born prematurely would bode well for the patients and for the children and for society. Now, those of us who were working at the end of the 90s in the NICU knew that was apples to oranges because the medical technology had advanced so much that we were saving babies to good end, to good result, who were half the size of the babies who were born in the 80s. And so because there was nobody who was addressing this at the same time, there was so little research. It was one of those kind of things where, so many of us were really caring about this problem, that there wasn't a research to prove that things were different now. When I laid my head on the pillow, just sort of, somebody ought to do something, I thought, well, okay, why not me? So I pitched this, and as an actor, as a SAG actor, I was working in San Francisco area at the time. I was doing commercials and voiceovers and whatnot, and I had 3 different producers who were pretty generally going to hire me pretty often, and I pitched this idea to all 3, and all 3 of them said the same thing. You should be the one. You don't want to give your baby away, so to speak. So that caused me to go to film school and produce this film, which won an International Medical Media Award because I interviewed parents and heard their stories, these ones that were contemporary of the time. And so it came out in 2003. And as it turns out, very little has changed in terms of how this extremely low birth weight baby will affect the whole family unit. And I want to say a little bit sadly, the fact is also that when parents have their children in the hospital 2 and 3 months, the neonatal intensive care units are only designed to help the baby and not much for the family. And that hasn't changed very much. Healthcare, they've taken away a lot of the social services that used to go along with it. And so it's still an issue. The film is called Micro Premature Babies, How Low Can You Go? And it's available for pennies or free, I think, on Amazon Prime still is seen all over the world.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And you also have an alias, Florence Nightingale.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you didn't think I was going to let you get away without talking about that, right?
Well, okay. So, you know, when that improv group, you know, went there, dissolved, we had a gig already lined up for one of my nurses associations. So I didn't want to disappoint. So I came up with my first solo show. Well, Miss Nightingale is the third solo show. And I wasn't going to do that one either, but I got hooked in reading her 200 books and articles, and over 10,000 of the 15,000 that we have still around. And but at the time, I was a assistant professor there at the University of San Francisco in nursing and health professions, and I was challenged by one of my National Speakers Association colleagues to make this my third show. And I really fought against it because I was just so busy. But eventually he wore me down, and I realized, as he said, you're a nurse, you've had 2 other solo shows, you know how to do this. And who best to tell the story of this remarkable woman to a generation who's forgotten her? And so that's what it's all about. We were off Broadway last year, and we continue to tour with the show. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, and you've got one more thing I think we need to touch on before we wrap here, and that's the journey as a fine artist, right?
Oh my gosh, last week the fine art website was launched, Candace Campbell fineart.com. For years I that's been my side passion. I've just been an artist, and when I got involved in doing the shows, the solo shows, I sort of put the brush down for a while. But now that I'm not actively an academic, I call myself a recovering academic. I have more time, even when the show is not on the road all the time. And so, you go through a real journey of, oh my goodness, can I remember how to do this? I was afraid. And yet, all the people that come to my house and say, I have over 30 paintings here. And I've been creating more. So people like them. And that to me is just a wonderful acclamation of something that, as an artist, you kind of do it for yourself at the first, and you don't know if that's going to be something other people will like. And we've had a lot of awards before, oh my goodness. And then here's the thing you don't know. I've been entering, now we have virtual art shows, and my work has been, I'm in like 3 shows right now. So
That's
I'm
cool.
I'm very happy
Congratulations.
about that.
Yeah, nothing but respect for people who have artistic skills. Some of my best artwork consists of some really bad stick figures. So, yeah. Candy, we're coming close to the end of the program here, and before we say goodbye, I want to give you a chance to tell the audience where they can find you on socials, how they can connect with you if they want to learn more about you.
Thank you. Well, I have three websites because, a confused buyer doesn't buy. And the first one, the Florence Nightingale Live, live.com website, is really for people who hire that sort of edutainment for the presenters. We'll be in New York at the biggest presenters conference in January, showcasing there. And then the next one is my name, candycampbell.com, and that's the Improv website. It has a lot of, both of them have videos and testimonials that people can get more information there. And then the last one, the new one, as I said, Candace, Candace, Campbell, fineart.com, and that has a store in it, and that's just B2C on that one.
Little something for everybody.
Yeah.
Candy, thank you so much for sharing your very unique perspectives with us today on Behind the Numbers.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure, Dave.
Pleasure was all mine. I also want to thank you out there in the audience for participating in this program and giving the support that you have for these past 6+ years. Can't do the program without you. Also, special shout out to Frank in Kansas City. Really appreciate all those great comments from you. So keep them coming, my friend. Thank you so much. My name is Dave Bookbinder. I am known as an expert in business valuation. I help my clients in valuing their businesses and intellectual property assets. And a lot of business owners truly don't know the value of their business. If that's you, let's talk. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's all we have for today, gang. We'll see you next time on Behind the Numbers. Take care.